Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started on our weekly marriage and family life book club. We're on week 4 of week 6. The reason we are starting about an hour later today is because at about around the same time that we would normally have this weekly book club, we actually had the Divine Liturgy for virtually in the evening for the feast of Saint of Panagia. Her nativity is the feast that we celebrate today, followed by tomorrow. Although we do not have a liturgy for tomorrow, tomorrow's feast day is for Saints Joachim and Anna. I'll go ahead and get us started with a prayer, and then I'll say just a few words of the feast of the Panagia, and then Vicky will go ahead and give us an introduction to the chapter, the homily that we read for this week, and then we'll go ahead and share our thoughts before closing. All right, let's go ahead and get started. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, by your presence, you blessed the wedding in Cana and showed us that you are the true priest of mystical and pure marriage. We thank you for that day on which, by your heavenly benediction, you joined us in the sacrament of marriage. Lord, continue to bless and enrich our marriage in love, companionship, mutual support, oneness of heart, and progress in faith and life. Protect our holy wedlock from sin, evil, and danger. Foster between us the spirit of forgiveness and the spirit of peace, that no resentment, quarrel, or other problem cause us to stumble and fall. Grant us to see our own faults and not to judge each other. Keep our bond of love always new, gladden our lives with the joys of marriage, that with one heart we may praise and glorify you all the days of our life. Amen. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ our God, have mercy upon us and save us. As I mentioned at the very, very beginning, today's feast is the feast day of the Nativity of the Virgin Mary, of the Theotokos of Panagia. This feast is the first feast that we celebrate in this new ecclesiastical year. It's the first feast, the first major feast of the church is her nativity. And the last feast that we celebrate during the liturgical year is the feast of the Dormition of the Theotokos, of her fallen asleep. That's the last church feast, and the first church feast is the Nativity. And her life, in a sense, kind of bookends the liturgical life of our liturgical life. We begin by celebrating her nativity, and we celebrate at the conclusion of the liturgical calendar her Dormition. And it's beautiful because within the context of her nativity and her Dormition, within her life, she kind of bookends the liturgical calendar. Within her feasts, you celebrate the feasts of Jesus Christ, which makes sense because she gave birth to God. Therefore, within her life, we celebrate the life of Christ. And as one of the hymns that we read, we chanted actually during Vespers last night, there's a statement that says, only through the Virgin Mary, only through the Theotokos, the Panagia, do we come to know Christ. That means that we come to know Christ more verily, more truly. It's through the Panagia who gave birth to Christ. She therefore is the gate, the door, the portal, whatever the ladder, whatever it is that you want to, whatever analogy it is that you want to use, by which God descended and came down to humanity and was incarnate of the Holy Spirit and the Virgin Mary, as we read in the Creed, as we say in the Creed every liturgy, and became man. So it's through the Panagia, it's through the Theotokos that we have Jesus Christ. She was a woman that was chosen out of all of history, from the beginning of Adam and Eve all the way until the time that has not yet come. She alone was chosen out of all the women that have ever lived as the holiest of all women. And through her, Christ was born. Through her, for those of you who are mothers, there's a beautiful poem that says, she referring to the Theotokos, she fed with her milk him who gives life to all. How beautiful is that? She's the one, she fed with her breast milk him, Christ, as a child, as an infant, him who gives life to all. It's very humbling for Christ to embrace that reality of humanity, but it offers much more glory and importance to the Virgin Mary, who gives us, who gives to Christ these very human and tender experiences to the one God. But she gave birth to him, she sustained him, and she also was there with him at the crucifixion. And also, it's for this reason that Christ is the one who comes down and receives the soul of the Panagia upon her dormition, her falling asleep. So this is the feast that we celebrate today, her nativity. It's for us the beginning of our salvation in the history of humankind, because from her birth we then get the birth of Christ, and then from the birth of Christ we get the crucifixion and the resurrection and the life of the church. So that's the Feast of the Panagia. Blessed name day to all those who may celebrate on this day, although if I'm not mistaken, it's very few, because typically people celebrate either on March 25th, the Evangelismos, the Annunciation, or on the Dormition. But either way, Chronia Pola to those Panagias, Panayotas, Marias, whatever it is that may be celebrating. Amen. All right, honey, go ahead.
All right. This week we're going over homily 12.
The Evangelismos, the Annunciation, or on the Dormition. But either way, Chronia Pola to those Panagias, Panayotas, Marias, whatever it is that may be celebrating. Amen. All right. How come I couldn't turn it on?
I'm not sure.
I think that the volume is completely down. All right, go ahead.
Anyways, so this homily is on Colossians 4:18, which reads, I, Paul, write this greeting with my own hand. Remember my bonds. Grace be with you. Amen. So St. John Chrysostom begins this homily talking about, I guess, a little bit about St. Paul's time in prison and his state of being while he was in there. So he was in bondage, and he's writing to the Colossians, basically telling them or asking them, how are you able to go out and adorn yourselves with gold, with partying and all these things? Just think about me and my bonds, and remember that I'm in prison and I'm writing to you from here, and almost as an encouragement that if we're ever in a similar situation, we can still praise God and have freedom in Christ. And then he goes on to say that, to explain marriage as a bond that's ordained by God. And because of this, I guess, ordination by God, he goes into depth about the way that people celebrate weddings with their wedding receptions. He questions why do we celebrate weddings in a silly and immodest manner, with drunkenness, with excessive spending, extravagance, and so on and so forth. And he talks about marriage as a mystery marriage as a reflection of the Trinity. So the two becoming one, not just in their marriage and being one in Christ, but being the two becoming one physically, and then the one being embodied in the person of a child.
Mm.
So he goes into depth about that, which is very beautiful. And he kind of circles back around to weddings, and he speaks about inviting Christ to the wedding, Christ and saints and angels, and not inviting the devil. So
Oof.
he makes some interesting points there. So that's a brief summary of the chapter.
Beautiful. All right, do you want to delve into one of the first things that you found interesting?
Yeah.
On your end, and then we'll switch back and forth.
Yeah, something that struck me in the very beginning was when he was talking about when St. Paul was talking about being in bondage. St. John Chrysostom speaks a bit about that, and he says, Um, think of Paul in prison. You are his disciple, his fellow soldier. How can you want to live in luxury while your fellow soldier is in chains? Has everyone in this world forsaken you? Remember Paul in prison and understand that to be alone is not to be forsaken. Do you delight in expensive clothes and gold and jewelry? Remember Paul's bonds, and these things will seem to you as more worthless than a prostitute's filthy rags or a handful of withered grass. Do you spend long hours adorning your hair and painting your face with cosmetics, hoping to make yourself beautiful? Think of Paul's squalor in prison, and you will burn with desire for his beauty. You will then consider worldly beauty to be ugly and will bitterly long to share Paul's chains. And he
Keep
goes
going, keep
on.
on, read that.
More.
Yeah.
Think of his face streaming with tears. Day and night for 3 years, he never ceased his weeping. Imitate his weeping. Make your face bright with tears. Weep for your sins, your anger, your loss of self-control, your love of revelry. Imitate Paul's tears, and you will laugh to scorn the vanities of this passing life. Christ blessed these tears when he said, "Blessed are you that weep now, for you shall laugh." Nothing is sweeter than these tears. They are more to be desired than any laughter. Pray earnestly for these tears, so that when others sin, your heart may be broken for them. Raise your sons and daughters in the same way. Weep for them when you see them led astray. Remember the psalmist's words, "The Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord accepts my prayers."
Nice.
This struck me because I feel like that's such an opposite mentality than what our society practices. And it like it hits it right in the head when it's like, do you basically do you like spend hours doing your hair and adorning yourself with makeup and all these things?
Do you think it's wrong for people to do that? Like,
No.
it's not just women who do that, right? Men sometimes do that too.
Sure.
Maybe not so much with the makeup, but with the hair or with the way they look.
Mm-hmm. I think our society places such an emphasis on these things that it makes it seem like that's the thing to focus on.
Mhm.
But all of these things are so passing. Imagine if we spent as much time in prayer as we spent getting ready for the day.
Yeah.
Imagine if we spent that much time contemplating, like not being despairing, but like thinking and praying about like our friends and our family, our children, and being sad when they're led astray.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like nowadays everyone has the mentality of like, well, that's your life, you do you, kind of just none of my business. It doesn't concern me. It's not, not my place. And I wonder how often we have that same mentality even in prayer. Like, do we just refrain from? I find myself, I guess, maybe even refraining from praying for people because I'm just like,
it's not my place to pray for them.
No, like I don't like dwell on other people's issues, if that makes sense. I'm not, I'm just like, oh, if I see some hardship in their family, I'm not. I don't think it's like our society's first response to say, oh, I'm going to pray for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think we're called to like think about these things and like our own struggles and our neighbors' struggles and weep for that, and feel like sad about these things so that we can bring that before God.
There's something beautiful that St. John Chrysostom says when he's talking, like, I don't think it's in these homilies, it's somewhere else. There's like a really brief passage where he's talking about St. Paul, because he loved St. Paul. Like, he wrote so much on his homilies, like we see here. And it's not just these homilies, but there's so many other homilies that he wrote on and commentated on. But he said, like, imagine the feet that walked this earth. Talking about St. Paul, imagine how much they walked to preach the gospel. Imagine the mouth that spoke these words, that wrote these epistles. Imagine the eyes that saw the vision of Christ on the road to Damascus. Like, so he really like elevates him eloquently to St. Paul, because, and then he says, St. Paul is the, Paul is the mouthpiece of Christ. And then Chrysostom is the mouthpiece of Paul. So it's like when Paul speaks, it's as though Christ is speaking. And when St. John Chrysostom speaks, it's as though St. Paul is speaking. Wow. And there's also that understanding that like there's one of his St. John's disciples was walking by his room, and he peeked in, and as St. John Chrysostom is like writing these homilies down, like these sermons and preaching or whatever it is, orations, he saw St. Paul whispering in St. John Chrysostom's ear. Mm-hmm. And to this day, his ear remains incorrupt. Wow. When you go to venerate. Yeah, it's very beautiful. But anyway, let me see if I can show one of these ones. Actually, let's head to the wedding section. Here. Where's that wedding section at?
It's the same page.
What about the two becoming one? Where's that one?
The page.
Okay, marriage is a mystery. So they come to be made into one body. See the mystery of love. If the two do not become one, they cannot increase. They increase only by decreasing. Isn't that nice? Mm-hmm. How great is the strength of unity. God's ingenuity in the beginning divided one flesh into two, but he wanted to show that it remains one even after its division. So he made it impossible for either half to procreate without the other. All right, I'm going to read that again. He wanted to show that it remained one even after its division, so he made it impossible for either half to procreate without the other. Now we can procreate through artificial insemination, or I don't know, or now we even procreate through like surrogate motherhood or whatever, all these other things. But he's saying here that God made it impossible to procreate like that, so that to show that the two, husband and wife, are still one flesh. But now that we are moving away from husband and wife being one flesh, now I feel like we see more and more of these introductions into the medical field too, like having a third party in a baby being born. It's like husband and wife plus this surrogate mother, or husband and wife plus medical interventions and all these things. And I'm not saying that there may not be a time and place for those things to happen. It's just interesting that the more we move away from this idea of like husband and wife, of these God assigned roles between husband and wife, the more we move away from that, the more we introduce different things into a relationship that otherwise would not have been the case. Mm-hmm. From one man, Adam, he made Eve, and then he reunited these two into one, so that their children would be produced from a single source. Likewise, husband and wife are not two, but one. If he is the head and she is the body, how can they be two? She was made from his side, so they are two halves of one organism. God calls her a helper to demonstrate their unity, and he honors the unity of husband and wife above that of child and parents. Here's another one. That's why I underlined that one. When in some of the marriage books that I've read, and I think I've spoken to you about this too, and which is why it would be pertinent to maybe look at this now that we do have a child. But in a lot of the marriage books that I read was, so one of the statements I saw was like a husband has a propensity to cheat on his family on his wife with his work, while the wife has the propensity of cheating on her husband with her kids. So the kids become like the source of joy and comfort and love. But that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't, like the husband and wife who are facing Christ shouldn't now redirect their gaze and attention from Christ onto the child, right? It should always be on Christ, while helping the Christ turn and focus on the child. And likewise, a husband and wife's gaze and focus and attention shouldn't be on each other, because then it becomes like a self-secluded what have you, it should always be focused on Christ, because when we focus on Christ, the love and the outpouring and the action of everything that we do as husband and wife pours out to everything else. It shouldn't be focused on one. It should always be focused on Christ. And I think this statement makes it here clearly. It's like he honors the unity of husband and wife above that of child and parents. But anyway, here, let's focus on one of your other ones.
Yeah. So just the next paragraph, he's speaking about the mystery of the two becoming one in the flesh. And he asks, how do we become one flesh? As if she were gold receiving the purest of gold, the woman receives the man's seed with rich pleasure, and within her it is nourished, cherished, and refined. St. John Chrysostom gets a little descriptive here. It is mingled with her own substance, and she then returns it as a child. The child is a bridge connecting mother to father, so the three become one flesh, as when two cities divided by a river are joined by a bridge, and here that bridge is formed from the substance of each, just as the head and the rest of the body are one, since the neck connects but does not divide them. So it is with the child. That is why Scripture does not say they shall become one flesh, but that they shall be joined together into one flesh, namely the child. But suppose there is no child, do they remain two and not one? No, their intercourse affects the joining of their bodies, and they are made one, just as when perfume is mixed with ointment.
Nice. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's beautiful, because, like, speaking about Sebastian, our son, it blows my mind that he's his own person. He's fully his own person, right?
Mm-hmm.
One individual,
mm-hmm.
but he's almost equal parts you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the three of us are one person.
I don't know if I would go that far. But
do you know,
can you expound on that a little more?
Yeah, it's just thank God for our child, first of all, and that we were able to have him. But
mm-hmm.
He's almost just like he completes a piece of the puzzle, which is our life, and our salvation.
I don't know if I would say that he completes a piece of the puzzle, because if you don't have a child, right? If you can't have children, they're not.
Yes, and then let me say that it's not like we were incomplete before. It just, I don't know. So it just fulfills more. It just enriches.
Again, I don't think I would agree with that, because if a husband and wife cannot have children, does that make their marriage less full?
No.
Okay. So how do you justify that? Because I'm trying to think that too, because I'm trying to think what Sebastian adds to the marriage that was not there before. I think for me, it expresses, you see more clearly a result of our love and our union.
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
So that's like a very clear, in where like a marriage where there are no children for whatever reason, it's not as clear, but it can be seen in other ways.
I agree. Yeah.
So
I'm not saying that having children makes your marriage more full or.
Okay.
I think I would agree with you. You say it's just an expression.
Yeah.
Of that oneness.
Yeah. And I think it is an expression, but I'm also trying to think, like, it's beautiful to think that yes, Sebastian is his own person, and he adds something more to the two of us, right? There's like there's a third human being that breathes and eats and sleeps and has a soul and has been baptized and is part of the church and part of Christ, right? Mm-hmm. So, but again, I think it goes back to that like focus and the gaze, where it's like, okay, we have our child, but our focus and our attention isn't just solely on the child. Our focus and attention is on Christ, and we bring the child to Christ. It's almost like we're caretakers of the child for a time being, because it's ultimately the child is for Christ. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about these thoughts through in the same way, because we just had a child. So
yeah, it's all very new.
Yeah. Okay. So where's that section where he starts talking about the wedding service itself? Is it this one? Okay, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just mention something which I thought. Here we have a few people joining us. Irini and Gia, welcome, the two of you. And Irini is enjoying and appreciating the conversation. Thank God. I hope that there are a few words that you can glimmer or glean from what we say that may be beneficial. Here's something that's beautiful. So St. John Chrysostom is kind of responding to some of the people that are talking against him, because he's talking a lot about marriage. And some of the things that he says are very explicit, such as the intimacy between husband and wife and the result of it being a child. So he says, some of you call my words immodest because I speak of the nature of marriage, which is honorable. Yet you show no modesty in your behavior at weddings. By calling my words immodest, you condemn God, who is the author of marriage. Shall I also tell you how marriage is a mystery of the church? The church was made from the side of Christ, and he united himself to her in a spiritual intercourse. All right? I'll read the last sentence again. The church was made from the side of Christ, and he united himself to her in a spiritual intercourse. Okay. Now, St. John Chrysostom is talking about how people say that his words are immodest because he's talking about the nature of marriage. And I think that's something that's important to talk about, because I feel like when we think about sexuality and intimacy, we're very timid about talking about that within the church, because we think we don't want to be immodest, or we don't want to bring things up. And it's almost like we're denying the fact that men and women in the context of marriage properly should be having sexual intercourse with each other. It's almost like, it's like, okay, let's just never talk about that. And in that way, we never speak to our children about it, which means they learn it from other sources, which are not healthy or beneficial in any way, friends or online. And it's like, it's the silliest thing. We should be, and he says it here, it's like, I speak about these things because God has honored marriage and has honored the blessing for husband and wife to be joined together. And it's like, isn't that silly?
Yeah.
I mean, I know your parents come from a background of like something where it's like it was, you shouldn't be talking about any of these things. Is that right?
No, my parents talked a lot about this, actually.
Oh.
I learned almost everything from my parents.
Oh, never mind.
my mom is much more timid to speak about these things.
Yeah.
But my dad was an open book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think that's the way that it should be.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't learn anything. That's not a judgment on my parents. I just didn't learn anything really from them in this respect.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would have been much healthier, much beneficial to have that have happened. Yeah. But he says the church was made from the side of Christ, and he united himself to her in a spiritual intercourse. Think about this. Christ is on the cross being crucified, and then he gets speared with a lance. He gets speared on his side from I think one of the centurions and one of the Roman soldiers that was there, pierces his side, and out of his side come blood and water. We hear this in the account of the Gospel of John. These are the elements, the body of Christ and then the blood of water. These are the three elements that we use for Holy Communion. So the church was made, the sacrament of liturgy was made out of the side of Christ, just like Eve was made out of the side of Adam, right? It's very beautiful imagery. And then he joins himself to the church in a spiritual intercourse in a way that the soul of every Orthodox Christian becomes the bride of Christ. The soul, being feminine, becomes the bride of Christ to Christ, who is masculine, Christ, who is the bridegroom. It's a very beautiful imagery. So just because we're running a little bit short on time, we'll go ahead and close off the last section which I think you should touch on, honey, on that section on the marriage when it talks about weddings and debauchery and all these things.
Let's see. Okay, so he talks a little bit about, what to look for in a husband. He kind of reiterates that, and vice versa, what a man should look for in a wife. And then he goes on to say, when you are satisfied that the man is virtuous and decide what day you will be married, beseech Christ to be present at the wedding. He is not ashamed to come for marriage. He's not ashamed to come, for marriage is an image of his presence in the church. Even better than this, pray that your children will each find such a virtuous spouse. Entrust this concern of yours into his hands. If you honor him in this way, he will return honor for honor. I'll read the next part because it's really good. When you prepare for the wedding, don't run to your neighbor's houses borrowing extra mirrors or spending endless hours worrying about dresses. A wedding is not a pageant or a theatrical performance. Instead, make your house as beautiful as you can and then invite your family and your neighbors and friends. Invite as many people as you know that have good character, and they will be content with what you set before them. Don't hire bands or orchestras. Such an expense is excessive and unbecoming. Before anything else, invite Christ. Do you know how to invite him? Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, he said, you do to me. Don't think that it is annoying to invite the poor for Christ's sake. Don't adorn the bride with golden ornaments, but dress her modestly. Thus, from the beginning of her married life, she will shun excess. Let there be no disorderly uproar. When everything is ready, call the bridegroom to receive the virgin. Let there be no drunkenness at the banquets and suppers, but an abundance of spiritual joy. Think of the many good things that will result from weddings like this. The way most weddings, if we can even call them weddings, and not spectacles, are celebrated nowadays ends in nothing but evil. As soon as the banquet is over, the bride's mother has to worry whether anything she has borrowed has been lost or broken, and whatever pleasure she may have had is replaced with distress when she sees what disarray her house is in. So when Christ is present at her wedding, he brings cheerfulness, pleasure, moderation, modesty, sobriety, and health. But Satan brings anxiety, pain, excess, expense, indecency, envy, and drunkenness. Let us remember all these things and avoid such evils, that we may please God and be counted worthy to obtain the good things he has promised to those who love him.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
No, what are your thoughts? Let me hear your thoughts first.
I mean, it's kind of scandalous.
What do you mean?
Because nowadays weddings are so focused on the dress, the outfits, the band, what kind of alcohol are you gonna have? Are you gonna have an open bar, dancing?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to accept this, what he's saying, especially if you had some of these things at your own wedding.
Did we have some of those things at our own wedding?
Yeah, we had dancing, we had alcohol, but it wasn't just beer and wine. I think it was just
it's wine at the table, I think, and then beer at the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I one thing. So we actually celebrate our anniversary tomorrow, and one of the things reflected on that is that we have. I rather enjoyed our wedding because it was this simple. It didn't feel like an excess theatrical pageant or whatever you want to call it. It really felt like the choir that chanted our wedding were all of our friends.
Yeah.
Right. The person who we didn't have a band, but we had a DJ, and that was one of our friends, and that was a gift. Even the photographers were like friends of ours, as well. The priests, we had seven priests at our wedding, and it was all close priests that we had known throughout our lives or associated with. I don't know. I felt like a lot of the stuff were there, and I think I made it a point to speak to you about this to make sure that Christ stays at the focus.
Yeah.
Um,
You did.
at the center of like everything that we're planning. It's like a lot of these things don't matter. You know, like we focus so much on like how we think the wedding is going to be the day of, but we forget like, okay, we should be planning for the wedding, sure, but we should be planning more importantly for like the next 30 years, 40 years of marriage, however long we're going to have.
At least the first year.
Yeah, at least the first year of marriage for sure. That should be part of the planning process as well.
And he says somewhere in here that it's not wrong. I think he talks about the banquets and whatnot. He said that he doesn't condemn these things. It's just when like drunkenness and all these things are introduced is when it resembles more of, I think he's called it like a pagan sacrament than it does like a Christian sacrament.
Well, you have the pagan god of drunkenness. I don't remember his name. So that might be something that he might be alluding to. But also, what's the point of getting drunk at your own wedding? Isn't that a moment that you would want to be sober to like almost fully embrace everything? You know, to capture as best as you're able to within your own memories and your own heart. I mean, sure, you're gonna have the photographer and the videographer or whatever, but you want still as best as you're able to remember within your own heart and soul and mind the experiences that have happened that day, your interaction. I can still remember vividly a lot of the stuff that have happened that wedding that wedding day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's no need for or weddings that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It almost doesn't make sense to me. Granted, our wedding cost it cost us a little bit. How much did our? It wasn't as expensive. When I compare it to other weddings, it was very little.
We were very blessed with a lot of generosity for our wedding.
Absolutely, yeah. We also made accommodations in other areas where we could have spent a lot more, like a wedding dress or my suit, my wedding suit I got from Amazon for $70, like 3-piece suit. It was amazing, and it fits so perfectly.
Well, I got my wedding dress off Amazon too.
I know. How much did you pay?
$120.
$120, yeah. But it's amazing. Well, thank God. All right, let's go ahead. We'll close off in prayer. Thank you for joining us, all of you, this evening. Do you have any other thoughts to say? No. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Lord Jesus Christ, by your presence, you blessed the wedding in Cana and showed us that you were the true priest of mystical and pure marriage. We thank you for that day in which, by your heavenly benediction, you join us in the sacrament of marriage. Lord, continue to bless and enrich our marriage in love, companionship, mutual support, oneness of heart and progress in faith and life. Protect our holy wedlock from sin, evil, and danger. Foster between us the spirit of forgiveness and the spirit of peace, that no resentment, quarrel, or other problem cause us to stumble and fall. Grant us to see our own faults and not to judge each other. Keep our bond of love always new, gladden our lives with the joys of marriage, that with one heart may praise and glorify you all the days of our life. Through the prayers of our Holy Father, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy upon us and save us. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you for joining us. Have a blessed evening and a blessed week. Amen.